T N.
Oh.
What is this word?
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of
T
N. Oh, yes, there we go. Look at that energy. You can never tell Jeanne that Anesu was voted out last night. Imagine that.
No,
I
mean, it happened a few months ago, but she's pretty happy for a person who just got voted out.
Yeah, I feel like I've been having to console everybody else. That's what this day I've been having to console people and be like, it's okay, it's all right. You know, that's what happened.
To be fair, though,
absolutely,
how everyone got voted off, I think yours is the one story where I'd be like, yeah, I would have been okay to go out like that, personally speaking.
Yeah. I think I was gifted a really great just edit throughout the game, and my exit episode was no different. So I'm just so grateful that my story was told in such a wonderful way.
I was annoyed. I was angry.
Sorry, Jeanne.
I have feelings. No, I have feelings, really. You know, the previous season, I got upset because it felt like there were so many opportunities to take down Rob. And this episode, I was like, woo, this top trio, they going down tonight. It's happening. And I was just like, wait, what? What?
I know.
I was like, you just missed the train, everybody.
I know. And I was there.
Not that I would be upset if Tyson or Kieran won, but,
Totally, Jeanne. Yeah.
But, you know, I was getting a message from my friend as well saying exactly the same thing. It's like, oh, no, Anesu, why? Anesu is literally the whole day. I think from yesterday to today, he's still been sending me messages. So I said, you know what, I'll tell you, personally, his name is Zonda, and he's also in the Jeanne camp of being super, super bleak. So just so you know that. Right.
Well,
but
shout
before,
out to Zonda.
Yeah. Before we move on, we've always start the show off with an icebreaker. And the question today is, we know we've got Dr. Yogi in the house. So, and Jeanne, you're more than welcome to answer this question too. It is, you're in a yoga class and you've got to let one rip, okay? And you let it rip and the whole class can hear you doing that. That's the option number one. And number two is you really need to go to the bathroom and you let a little bit of weed out and it runs down your leg. Which one would you rather find yourself in? Which situation?
Definitely fart in a yoga class. I've done that before. And I've got a beautiful voice where I'm just like, just release. If you let go some air, it's okay. Surrender. That's part of the process. Release those toxins from your body. So that is happening.
Let it go. Let it go. Yeah.
The cold doesn't bother her anyway.
Yeah, or the warm, you know,
all the warm,
the stream of yellow.
And you, Jeanne, which one would you choose?
So it depends on my age. How old am I? Am I like 90? Because then it can be forgiven. But no, I'd also have to go with a bit of gas. Nobody needs a wet yoga mat. It's slippery. Accidents happen, but not because of that. Shouldn't happen.
Yeah. I agree with you guys. I think those are fair answers. I don't know if our audience want to comment on that. You're more than welcome to let us know in your comments. Let us know what you're thinking about that. But it is time now. Anesu, it's all about you. This is your show right now today. Jeanne, feel free to ask any questions you want. Anesu, you're out of the game. You've already started off saying, you know, you're happy with the edit that you've got. Looking back at it, the first thing, talking about Zonda, the first thing he said, and why he was screaming at the TV so much was because he was like, wait, she had the tribal council pass and she didn't use it. Like, is that one thing that's been running through your mind constantly?
Actually, no. You know, I tended to play quite a considered game. So a lot of my decisions had a lot of thought, days of thought actually behind them, meditation, all sorts of things behind them. And so I had really played out the different eventualities of what would have happened if I had played my tribal council pass. And the difficult thing with the tribal council pass, which I think has been called, what is it, safety without power before? Is that right? In other seasons of Survivor. And is that you can save yourself, but then you lose your biggest power in the game, which is your vote. And especially because my game was about being a swing vote, being a double agent, that's where, you know, I could really leave my mark. it made it really difficult to play that advantage and to figure out what the right way or when the right time was to play my tribal council pass. So I considered the option of playing it at this last tribal council to save myself, but I really wanted to save it for the next one because I felt like if I had sent myself back to camp, Nicole probably would have gone home. She probably would have thought that I betrayed her trust, so that would have been a likely loss of a jury vote. Anela would have felt like I had thrown him under the bus. And I think we would have been left with a scenario where it was Anela with the three-headed snake, as I like to call it, of Tyson, Kieran, and Warda. And then me, Santini, and Chappie's in the minority without a tribal council pass to change the numbers around in the next vote. So it was all of that stuff that was running through my mind that made me decide, along with the fact that I thought that I had the numbers, that made me decide not to play it in the end.
Yeah, fair enough. Jeanne,
yeah,
you wanna touch on that?
You know what? It's so interesting because people think that when you get to tribal council that, you know, this what we see on TV happens, but tribal council is long. It's like that one was probably, I would guess, an hour and a half to 2 hours long. And things juggle so often in tribal council that you constantly like second guessing yourself and you pick up on little words what people are saying, and then they're like, is this about me? No, it can't be about me. And the one thing I just wondered to myself, and it happens even when you're safe, you're like, am I really safe? Was there, like, a lot of people go home with advantages in their pocket going, I knew I should have played it. Was there a moment that you thought to yourself, I've got it, there's a voice here saying, do something, make a play?
You know, I think the one thing that I had running through my mind was not so much playing my tribal council class, but bluffing it. I really think that if I had bluffed my tribal council pass to Anela and told him about it before tribal, and mentioned maybe not the full details of what the advantage was, but had told him that that was something that would have also been on his side of the camp, I think that could have played in my favor. And I actually remember one of the things that was running through my mind to do in that final tribal was, before Nico asked us to go and vote, to reveal my tribal council pass and to kind of lie about it. I don't know how this would have gone down, but indulge me. I thought that I would say, hey guys, listen, I have a tribal council pass. This allows me to see the first half of the votes and then to decide whether I want to go home back to camp or not. So I kind of thought about the concept of bluffing and kind of reframing the advantage in order to scare people off. And I think that could have been an interesting gameplay. You know, it wouldn't have cost me anything. And if it had paid off, it would have been a big move. So that's the one thing that I've wondered, what if I had done that and called people's bluff, what would have happened?
And to be fair, I think you got better acting skills than what Tyson said of Renier. So I would have favored. I would have thought you could have pulled something like that off. We do have a really good question here from Joseph saying, Anesu, did you recognize Kieran as well? Saying that Kieran, he recognized you from university days.
Yeah, I actually, when you have that moment where someone picks you out in a crowd and they're like, oh, Anesu, and you're like, who is this person again? I had that moment with Kieran.
How do you pronounce your name again, Kieran? Kieran?
Yeah. What is your name again? So I recognized him. Like, I felt like he was familiar, but I could place him from UCT, but I didn't remember what he was studying at the time, and I had no idea what sort of work he was doing. And so I think he kind of had a bit more of an advantage in knowing me in that scenario, because he knew that I was a doctor, he knew what I had studied, and that gave him a little bit of some insight into how I could be a threat in the game.
I'm pretty sure that the IQ of this season is like off the charts, and it's a great ad for UCT.
Yeah, fair enough. And also, I'm looking back at Kieran going, how did you guys not like mingle in the same social circles? Because there's that moment at Tribal Council, beautifully edited, where, you're talking and the conversation's happening directly at each other, but you're completely pointing in the other moment. But Kieran does it. He says exactly what we're all thinking, where he's going, she's the mirror image of me in this game, and she's playing a hell of a game, so I've got to make sure I get her out. And I've put you here as the Star Wars character. I think her name is Rey. You know, she's got that relationship
awesome.
with Kylo Ren, and I think like that was the relationship between you and Kieran, and I found that fascinating in terms of how you went. So I don't know how you guys weren't friends at university, but we've got another question here saying, Anesu, tell us what you said to Santweni.
Yeah. So what is the context of that conversation? Do they mean in terms of trying to convince her in terms of the vote? I think I'll answer it in terms of that. Do you think?
I don't know. You could ask whatever you told her. I mean, you could it could be like while you were just chilling and looking at the stars one night. I mean, I think that might be interesting too.
Awesome. Yeah. So Santweni and I had a great relationship in the game. You know, I tend to gravitate towards the underdog or the outcast a lot. I think that you see that a lot in my personal life. I'm always rooting for people who've been disempowered in some way. And so quite early on in the game in Vuna, I could tell that Santweni wasn't really feeling like she'd been seen. And so we did have a couple of nice chats there. You know, we spoke about her being queer. I spoke about the work that we do in terms of supporting the queer community at the Nest. And so that seed was definitely planted. And then we didn't see each other almost for the rest of the pre-merge game. And we only joined each other at post-merge. And what was quite surprising was, of course, you know, she kind of revealed my double agent status to Nicole. But to give you context to that, she actually came back to me after that conversation when we were talking with Chappies about us forming the Destiny 3. And she actually told me that she had let it slip to some of the Zambas that I might be playing a double agent game. So that helped gain a lot of respect for me from Santweni. And I think I also had a different perspective of her in the game where I think you'll see a lot of players kind of felt like she was chaotic. There was a comment that she needed to be babysat. I thought it was crazy that she wasn't picked for that reward challenge in the puzzle because I knew that she was great at puzzles, but it was good for me because it was added incentive for her to turn on the alliance. But my view of Santweni was that she was purposefully putting across this image of somebody who was a loose cannon, who was playing with her emotions, who didn't have any strategy. And I felt like she was putting that across because she wanted people to underestimate her. And, you know, my experience of Santweni was behind the scenes where we were making decisions about moves and things to make. And in those scenarios, she was very sure. She was very sure about what she wanted to do to suit her individual game. She had a lot of clarity. A lot of her decisions weren't actually emotional. And so, you know, you'll see with and I think it's reflected in Operation Destiny and that vote where my
Did you come up with a name for that, by the way? Just out of curiosity.
Did.
It's such a Jedi moment. She's a Jedi. She's just feeding the Force. So maybe that's where it went wrong for you, was you listened to the dark side. Maybe too late or too soon. I'm not sure. John, should she have flipped on them earlier? Is this maybe the criticism in the one part in the flaw in a game?
You know, I could understand why she didn't. From my perspective with Operation Destiny, I had a good relationship with Amy. I was building it with Rainier. And so even if the Zamba OGs had come together to form a close-knit 4 with Nicole and Anela, I still felt like I was in good standing with them. Whereas Santweni, I think, was in a different position. And the same with Chappies, where I think if those 4 had formed a tight-knit group, she might have been the next person to be voted out. And she expressed those concerns to both me and Chappies in saying that that's what she was worried about with Operation Destiny. And you know, I find that the best way to navigate an alliance with people is for everyone to feel like the alliance benefits them in some way. Otherwise, you end up having people turning on their alliance. So I wanted Santweni to feel like I valued her opinion, that I valued her making moves for her own individual game. And that's essentially why you'll see Operation Destiny didn't end up going forward. But I knew that I needed Santweni as a number later on. And so choosing to go with my own individual gameplay wouldn't really have been a win for me in the long run.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, John, you can just jump in when you want to.
Yeah, it's so interesting because that the way that Anesu approaches people, and it's something that becomes very difficult the more comfortable you get in the game. So you can see it happening now with Tyson and Kieran, the language that they use, the tone that they use. They almost it's like they're the popular girls at school now, and they the way that they speak to people has that tone, and it happened to me. I had the same conversation with Tom where I was like, no, you're fine for the next couple votes. And
sorry, Jeanne, sorry, before you continue, guys, I completely downplayed who we have on here today. We've got first princess runner-up of Survivor. Yeah, I mean, Anesu, you're amazing too. But I mean, she came second in her season. We're forgetting this fact.
Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot that point. Yeah, Anesu.
But it's so interesting because when you're in it, you're only seeing one portion of what's happening. When you're watching it at home, you're just like, what is happening? Like the tones that you use, the way you speak to people, it's cringy, man, because the more comfortable you get, the more you sort of like want to play this boss character, and now you're in charge. And that tone, I thought that Anesu had the most welcoming and like leveling tone, and the way she brought people in. I think, was it Kieran or Tyson or somebody was talking about that in the episode, and how comfortable she is at bringing people from different backgrounds together. And I think with Santoni, that is actually the main key. How do you talk to her? When do you talk to her? How often do you talk to her? Your tone. And the moment you put her down as somebody below you, somebody who's other, somebody who needs to be babysit, you have got a problem on your hands. What I find interesting is that she didn't, in the previous episode, when she was shown clearly that she was on the bottom, that she and Chappies didn't make, I don't know, there was something to be done in this episode and the previous episode where I thought that Santoni being pissed off enough to make the move didn't actually pan out. And it surprised me because of how important that is to her, being taken seriously, spoken to as an adult individual with agency. And I think Anesu has the golden touch when it comes to that. And somebody's asking about the social game, and that is so important. I had a social game, but there comes a point where I forgot for a second where I was and who I was talking to and why I needed them and how do I speak to them when I need something. It's fascinating, the whole game. But when you're in it, you're only seeing 7 people in the game at the moment, 8 people. You're only seeing like one portion of it. When you're at home, you sit and you go, wow, okay, I was clueless. I didn't know what was happening.
And I mean, to that point, I think that's why week in, week out, we're sitting here on TNO and the viewers watching, we're saying, you know what, Anesu's got what it takes to go to the end. Because right now, for some reason, she's under the radar. She's the submarine. She's packing nuclears there, but she's completely under the radar, only putting the scope because she's got that nature to her where she can draw people in. And it was only a matter of time, though, Anesu. I mean, I think it got to a point where it was you revealing the rest of the submarine, technically speaking, that was your downfall. But at the same time, was there any other time in the point of game that you could do it? Like this was, argument, if it goes your way, geez, you keep powering forward and, possibly land up winning the game. Now you made the decision. And unfortunately, it was the swing voters like a Santoni who went with you in the end because of what you were able to do, like Jeanne saying, giving the reassurance. But then, the other two who are now were on the bottom were left to make the power decision. And that's just crazy how this game works.
Yeah,
totally, Claudio. I mean, it's one of those crazy things where there's that decision of when do you put your cards on the table, post merge. And I really feel like if you leave it too late to final 5 or, it's too late then. I'm the type of person where if I was to vote for somebody at the end, I'd want to see that they were playing consistently for as long as is possible. So I really wanted to make a big move. And unfortunately it meant, kind of slithering out of the shadows. I loved how Tyson called me a snake in the vote reveal. And I had been a snake from day one, man. I was snaking a lot of people. And I think for it to only be seen later on when I wanted it to be revealed was a good thing. But obviously I took a risk. I gambled, and sometimes you win, sometimes you don't.
100%.
That's true. Joseph saying, you're a master communicator, and we've just touched on your social game. For other future players that are playing out there, your secret of playing this social game, and Jeanne says, when you're out there, it's pretty tough. But what is the thing that sets you apart when you are doing that, when your goal is to communicate with these people and, resonate with different cultures and different backgrounds?
I think first and foremost, it's an exchange. So in our yoga space, we always talk about an exchange of energy, where you can have an exchange where someone pays you money in order to come to a yoga class, or we've had scenarios where people who can't afford yoga come and help us out in the store. And what that does when there's an equal exchange is it makes both parties feel like they're empowered. It makes both parties feel like they're valued, and it kind of takes out that strange power play that you often start to see in a lot of alliances and a lot of duos or trios in the game of Survivor. So I think actually outside of the game as well, in terms of persuading people or negotiating with people, if you make it seem like your plan is benefiting the other as much as it's benefiting yourself, it's much more likely to go ahead than if people think that, oh, you're just trying to get what you can out of me in order to benefit yourself.
It's also very interesting to me that this season we have, and I spoke to LaRue about it, this season, more than a lot of other seasons, we have showmen. So people who love the sound of their own voice, they put on great character. Like you cannot make up how great Chappies is in a confessional. You can't. It's like, I'm like, did he write down what he was going to say? It's magnetic. But it's interesting to me, the people who are doing well are the ones who speak but stop and listen. And that for me is something, when I came out the game, I was like, you needed to stop talking and listen. And when actually in the game, in my game, when I got quiet in the game, I was able to listen better. At first I was, feminist people left, right and center. And then when I quietened myself, and I had to like go internal, because every time I spoke, I was causing chaos. And that's when actually I was able to start quietly doing moves. And it was difficult at the end because you have to balance doing it loud and proud so that people can see it, and quietly. And that is a really interesting balance. And I think Anesu had it incredibly well done. And I think Kieran as well. Tyson is more of the quiet one. He's the one who's just there scheming. But Kieran has an ability to speak and listen. And that listening is so important in this game.
It's so funny you say that, Jeanne, because I remember from your season you speaking out when you felt like injustices were happening. And I actually took a lot of notes from your game with my veganism, right? Where I was kind of trying to figure out, how far do you want to push your own ideals? This idea of not eating meat, is that going to distance you from people? And you're totally right. I could see in your game that moment where it's not that your personal views take a backseat, but you take the time to listen to the other view, the other perspective. And that really does help in terms of building your social gameplay and getting people on your side.
And my problem as well is that I get like competitive when somebody's not listening to my point of view. Now I've listened to you, but you weren't listening to me. And I had a big problem with Martinez. And I just couldn't get through for him to take in what I was saying. So what he was saying was outrageous. And I was like, where do you live? But he was not returning. And that's when I became combative. And eventually I had to just be like, okay, what you're spewing is complete and utter rubbish. It's not based on fact. I'm a journalist. So when somebody comes with nonsense they read on Facebook around the fire, I'm just like, So it's a fine balance. But what I appreciate in Survivor South Africa is the ability to cast these people to push the buttons of the other people on your tribe. When I walked onto the beach and I had a pastor and I had Martinez, I was like, there was a moment in my casting where they asked me a question. They were like, how do you feel about religion? And I walked onto the beach and I had these two like staunch religious oaks. And I was like, I see what you did there.
Totally. I mean,
so
Jeanne,
interesting.
I feel like my time in Vuna was like a crash course into Afrikaans culture. Like,
I can imagine
so much Afrikaans. There was a lot of praying and things as well. But I think it was I was so in the minority that you kind in that situation you're kind of forced to listen, as you said.
Absolutely.
And, my Martinez, I'm definitely not comparing the two of them, but You know, in terms of the player that kind of pushed my buttons, that was Marisha, where we have very different backgrounds, very, very different backgrounds and different political views. But the incredible thing is, because we didn't have to turn on each other because we kept on winning immunities, I actually got to know her on a deeper level, learn about her children, how she sees herself as a wife and as a mother. And I think having the benefit of us not needing to cannibalize essentially the Vuna tribe when we were winning immunities kind of helped to kind of repair our relationship somewhat in the game.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about all of this is these sort of constructs in terms of the receiving and giving. But when you are in the minority, and I suppose this is also a lesson like in larger sense of life, when you are in the minority, and unfortunately, especially if you want to go a bit further, you have to kind of accept a certain thing in order to make the influence. Because had you lost those challenges, you probably would have been turned on because of the different views and perspectives. And you wouldn't have had the time to mend the relationship or even develop a certain relationship. And I find it interesting that, Jeanne, you were saying, Martinez, it was quite combative. And when he wasn't able to listen, that's when you decided to speak up because you couldn't break through to him. And that is an incredibly frustrating thing. But from Anesu, you kind of experienced it in a complete different way with Tyson. In terms of Tyson wasn't receptive at all. He decided he was only playing with Kieran and he wasn't going to give you any information. There was no give and take, and he had made the decision. So for you, what do you do as a player in that sort of situation where you are someone who's willing to exchange things like you say, but you've got someone giving you zero, nothing, nada?
Yeah, you cut your losses and you try to get that person out.
And that's where you flipped.
Yeah,
that was the moment.
Yeah, it was
the cold shoulder. I remember talking about it intensely in the episode after that one, because that was the moment you could see, hold on, I'm kind of important to you, but I see where the hierarchy is now, and I'm definitely on the bottom. And that you could see the moment. It was beautifully edited, and you came back to camp and you were like, I'm getting the cold shoulder. And that was a beautiful moment where you could see that, okay, now the plan started to form.
Totally. And also, because I was playing a double agent, the other thing, I think if it was just that situation, I might have tried again with Tyson and tried to repair the bond. But having received the intel that there had been an advantage at that reward, and they had purposefully kept that information from me and told Kieran, really reinforced the fact that this is a losing battle. I can try as much as I want to repair the bonds here, but that essentially that relationship has been lost. And that's when I really started to mobilize in terms of turning on the alliance.
And so we've got a question here from Mesobotse saying, you said you admire Russell Hans's game, which is very interesting considering that you're someone that goes with the flow. And here you're saying you like a person who plays like a sort of volcanic game. She says, you played more game of poverty with the flirting element. Would you consider yourself a flirt on the season? Were you the flirty player?
I think the question says without the flirt element. Just
Okay, you may be right. Without the flirty element. But was there any flirting? We might as well ask the question. I mean, we didn't see behind the scenes. Was that zero flirting?
Oh, no. Gross.
My flirting game is the worst. I've been in a committed relationship for like 8 years. So when I was in a relationship, it was before the apps, before Tinder. So when I hear my single friends talking about the dating scene, I'm like, count me out. I'm used to the old school, walking up the university steps and someone asks to, hold your books, and that's kind of where things spark. So my flirting game is zero.
Imagine,
if this was
8 years ago,
a dating show, I definitely wouldn't have survived.
8 years
But Claudia, please tell me how interested you would be on somebody who has not had a toothbrush, not had a brush, a bar of soap, anything clean to wear, to put deodorant on for, I think you in 29 days.
28. 28.
Tell me that you're keen on a woman who smells like the bottom of a shoe at this point.
Jeanne, if she gets me further into the game, I will be lapping anything.
Trust me, there's just everybody's so fascinated with this idea of like romance on the beach. Boston Rob and Amber did it. I don't know how, because people are nasty.
Stars were aligned.
The moment
on the highest of levels.
the loved ones challenge on my season, my best friend walked up to me. She didn't say, "Oh my God, it's amazing to see you." The words out of her mouth was, "Oh my God, you stink." That was it.
I like that.
It's not
I like that question. And who's on the island, whether you, I mean, excluding yourself, smelling your armpits are probably the smelliest thing on the island. But who was the smelliest person on the island while you were there?
It's such a weird thing to say, but I genuinely felt like we all smell like roses.
You
like,
can't smell. That's the problem.
And
the problem is
the camera
you. The camera. So it's so fascinating to me. You can't smell yourself and you can't smell others, but the crew can. And I remember they said something along the lines of they're not even allowed to wear strong smelling soap and stuff because our senses are so heightened, but now we're like normalized in the bloody jungle. And it's so fascinating that you don't smell each other or yourself. But as soon as something changes, I once had a whiff of somebody, one of the producers who had beautiful shampoo smell. And I was like,
you know what was also crazy for me? It was also crazy to me that I noticed my smell once I was in a clean environment as well. So, when you do your then and nows and you see yourself in the mirror, all of a sudden I could smell the fire on me. I was aware of how I smelled. It's almost like there's something about being in a cleaner environment or surrounded by clean people that then makes it obvious that
it's very strange.
You've let yourself go.
Well, on this topic, I feel like it's a fair subject, and please tell me if this is too personal. But for two ladies playing the game, you have other like female
common
things
question.
that yes,
Very common.
The female things, like how does Survivor cater for that? If that makes sense. That time.
Can I just say this is one of the reasons I say that Survivor for a woman is way harder than Survivor for a man. It's unquestionably something that is an issue. You not only, even if you're on the pill or you have some kind of contraception that stops your period, you still go through the hormonal roller coaster. So at some point you just like cry for no reason. Totally. It's bananas.
Yeah, 100%. I'm also all about being natural and allowing my body to do what it is she needs to do. So I knew that there was an option that I could have stopped my period, for the duration that I was on the show, but I purposefully chose not to. And yeah, you're right, Jeanne. It's a whole other thing that you need to contend with. You're worried about messing yourself and that showing up on camera. It's just an added concern. And I think that's why a lot of female castaways will just inherently back other female castaways because that there's just an added burden that you need to deal with being a woman.
Just a quick story, Claudia. The first day on the island, so they were in quarantine for a lot longer than we were. I was in a hotel for 7 days, and I knew that my cycle was about to hit. And I had gone to a clinic to ask the sister if I could get the injection. So she says to me, "Okay, have you been on it before?" And I was like, "No." She asked me why I needed to go, and I couldn't really tell her. I was like, "I'm going to be isolated somewhere." And she then said, "Well, if you've never been on it before, I'm not going to give it to you now because we don't know how you're going to react. So let's rather put you back on the pill and you can take it and time it and everything." And I was like, "Okay, cool." I swear to God, the first day, it's chaotic. You don't know what you're stepping into. You've never been on TV before. There's a lot of process that goes through the show. And you're so nervous. Your anxiety levels are through the roof. You're excited. You're nervous. You're scared. Everything is going at once. And what happened with me is that day that I stepped onto the beach is the day I started my period. And so by the time, swear to God, by the time we get to the beach, it's hours later. And I'm like, oh, okay, great. Good thing I wore maroon underwear. But I said to the producers, I was like, "Do you have any tampons with you?" And they're like, "Oh, no, it's in your bag back at." So I went the whole day with just like free flowing. Thankfully, everything was wet. And that throws you immediately. And it's something that you're not prepared for. And it's so complicated. but it is a common question that comes up.
Totally. And your performance in challenges, I find, is very much impacted if you're on your cycle, as well as, like you said, your
because of your energy.
Decisions. Yeah, your energy is low, your strategic decisions, your emotions are heightened. You want to bite everyone's head off. So if I had been on my cycle when Marisha threw me under the bus about the chickens, whoa, we would have had a whole other kind of scenario on the show. But such a great question, Claudia. Thanks for asking that.
Well, to be fair, it's actually a question I get asked a lot. Everyone's like, hey, actually, I think it came from my brother-in-law, to be honest. He's like, hey, just ask this question. Because also they came across an article saying the risk of infection as well for ladies that aren't able, in your case, Jeanne, I mean, you've told the story, and I think there was a former castaway in the US season that had an issue, and the possible of infection in terms of the sort of scenario when you don't have the tools to equip yourself in such a scenario. And that's, like you guys said, or like your lady said, that's an issue that, that you have to contend with. Men don't.
No, and a lot of people believe that Survivor is fake in this way, that somehow they allow you to go to the bathroom, that you're allowed to, some people even believe to the point where they take you to a hotel afterwards. And I played with people who went onto the game with that view, and I was like, boo-boo, have you not been paying attention for the 20 years that this game is on? Like, if it was fake, my point is, if it were fake, and this game is American, right? So if it were fake, somebody would have written a whole book about it being fake. There's nothing. It's real. And to that point, it's so real that at that point, they're just like, oh, well, we can't really help you. Sorry. Good luck. It's hectic. It's very hectic. And these are the things that you will never be able to be prepared for. And a lot of people go into the game and it's the soft things that you didn't think. It's not necessarily the fact that you don't have food or the game is tough. It's these things that you were never ready for. And I went into therapy 2 years after my show, and my therapist said, but it sounds a bit like you have PTSD. And that's exactly what it is. They liken it to going to war with people. And that's also why the relationships that you form in the game happen so quickly, and they're so real. It's a weird dichotomy of different things happening at the same time that you were never ready for.
Yeah,
totally.
And on that note, I mean, you spoke about the relationship with Marisha. Who is your best relationship out there? Walking away, I know this person now based on this experience. We're tight for a long time. I think I have that with a lot of the players, but the relationship that's a step above the most is definitely with Chappies. We shared a lot of jokes, a lot of fun times on the island, and I kind of used to liken our relationship to your best friend in kindergarten, where you do all of the naughty things behind your teacher's back, and we're sipping on oysters, but making sure that we still take a few back to the tribe, but not too many, because we also want to feast for ourselves. So that's definitely a relationship that I cherish during the game, and that I think will definitely stand the test of time. And that's interesting that you mentioned the kindergarten sort of analogy, because if you're going back to the Australian season, Luke Toki does this thing where that's how he uses that as a strategic play in his game, where he's going to find a player, see something mischievous, get them to do it with him, and it's their little secret, and he establishes that bond. So it's interesting that you've said that. Before we move on to the next part of the show, one last question. Hilgard's saying, did you consider yourself an underdog, in control, in the middle, Anesu? Seeing as you were on Vuna, you'd understand what that is.
Yes, awesome to get a question from you, Hilgard. I've seen you commenting on the show, so shout out to you.
He's a regular.
Yeah, I think I definitely considered myself to be an underdog. I think I was underestimated very early on in the tribal game. You'll see me sitting out of 2 challenges, actually. And one of them was that puzzle where the Dino just took the reins and was just going absolutely crazy, and he beat us by a landslide, that I think I would have done really well in, because puzzles were my strength. And I think you see that in some of the other tribal immunity challenges. So I definitely considered myself to be an underdog. I felt like I was happy to play that role and people to underestimate me, but I knew that in order for me to win, I would have to redeem myself by showing that wasn't true. And that's why I went so hard into the individual immunities from the get-go post-merge, even though I knew that might put a target on my back, because it kind of felt like I needed to change the jury's perspective of me as a physical player and as a physical threat, especially in terms of that outplay part of the game.
It's interesting. I just want to make a point. I bring this up all the time in my lives on a Sunday, where people in the show, the men especially, really just assume the women are weak. And every challenge so far, all the men have dropped out. And besides Kieran and Tyson right at the end, the women are the ones that are strong. And it's so fascinating to me when Chappie said, oh, Sean, you're next, Rainier, you're next. They always focus in on the men, and every challenge the women are outperforming the men. And so my thing is that when you walk into the game and survive, if you're a woman, you're perceived as weaker. They will make you sit out the challenges. You look at when Paul didn't listen at all to anybody in his tribe that was a woman, giving them advice on that block challenge. It is, if you're a woman, you're an underdog to begin with. Doesn't matter. Marisha's the only one who probably stepped up because they went, oh, look at her muscles. And if my season is anything to go on, you don't even have to have any muscle to do anything on Survivor. You have to be able to play with people and be strategic mind. You have to be smart. You have to be able to adapt. So this idea of strength in Survivor is completely warped. But Survivor is a slice of reality.
Yes.
Yep.
So that's what is perceived strength in the real world. It's a fascinating place to be. And when you go in as a strong woman like I did, I'm here to slay, and all of a sudden people are perceiving you a different way than you perceive yourself, it's a really weird reality check and a reminder of the world that we come from.
100% from that perspective. But I do want to say, if we know this, and it's currently played out in that way in the early stages, at least in the current Australian Survivor season, with like finding your weak players. But we do know that this is a common throughout all 41 seasons or 40 or whatever the seasons are of the US and the South African ones. This is a common theme that plays out. So as a lady who is going to play Survivor, how do you use this sort of scenario to your advantage, as opposed to going, I am the weak one, and moving that, to your advantage? Anesu, how would you do that?
Yeah, I think that's essentially what I try to do is to go into the game where you use people underestimating you to your advantage to coast through. Not to the point where, if you go to tribal, you get voted out for being, the weakest link in your tribe, but just to the point where you aren't considered as a physical threat, especially the closer that you get to merge. That's where you really want people underestimating your physical ability. And so I think we see that from a lot of female players. I think it's Hayley from the current Survivor Australia, who's sat out a number of challenges. And I think she's doing that to make sure that people underestimate her. So use that to your advantage. And I think it's so interesting to see people's perspectives of you. And especially if their perspective is false, sometimes it works in your favor to go along with that false perspective than to show people that they're wrong and to try to get them to see you in the way that you see yourself.
Yeah. And I don't know if we want to talk about this, Jeanne and Anesu. You ladies can tell me yes or no. Is that in sort of the comparison, if a lady makes the move, and I know Chaos Kaz was back in the American seasons where, she was credited, or she was called a snake, whereas a male doing the same thing gets called the strategic
100%.
Genius. So, and I think Nicole, to be fair, Nicole, despite all the moral sort of issues that happened last season, Nicole walked away with a darker shade than her male counterpart in terms of the game that was played, despite the fact that it was similar. So what do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's definitely real. I mean, it's completely, you can't deny it. For some reason, and again, it goes down to these societal images that we have of women, where you have women in the workplace or in business environments who are great at negotiating, and they get called manipulative, or you have women who stand up for their opinions and they get called aggressive, instead of being called strategic or assertive. And so, there's a lot of strange wording that we have when it comes to women in power. And that's mainly because we haven't seen that enough. We haven't seen a representation of female leadership or female strength to the point where it has lots of different iterations. And so for us, female strength is kind of there's one image that you have, whereas if you look at male or masculine strength, there's often different archetypes that can slot into that. And so I think the more and more we see women playing the game of Survivor or running businesses, negotiating big deals, the more we'll start to just subconsciously internalize different ways of viewing womanhood, viewing femininity, and viewing strength.
It is so complicated because I sat at the end and my jury was stacked with women and none of them voted for me. And so it's so complicated that oftentimes the lack of support is often coming from other women. And it's so complex because we're pitted against one another. And we are taught from a young age that we need to outperform people. Other women specifically. And so when I got to the end, I assumed that I would have Katinka's vote, that I would have Annalisa's vote, and I just didn't. And the problem was I realized watching it on TV, and by the end of the game, I had nothing left. My emotions, my brain power, nothing was left for me to argue. So when I got there,
Robbed Queen, and personally I'm just going, I'm watching that show, and I'm like, how the hell?
And I can see it now. Yeah. And I can understand why they did it, because when we went into the final tribal council, my standard was up here. I had to perform here. I had to tick more boxes than Tom did. And I was just not able to. And I don't deal well, and this is another thing that women don't do well with, is confrontation. In confrontation, I shut down. And when people want to attack me personally, not the argument, I can have a debate with you where we have equal input. But what happened with my tribal council, and it was different to the next season, was everybody got up and they could do and say whatever they want to the point where the people on the jury were attacking one another. My tribal council was 3 hours long, and I just sat there in a state of like vitriol being fired at me, and emotionally I shut down. And what happened was, because Tom is used to fighting, he's a bar brawler, guys. The amount of fights that he's been in, he likes confrontation. What happened was everybody expected me to be here. I performed here, and Tom just delivered bare minimum, and that's all he had to do to win.
He delivered the expectation.
What's so frustrating. And again, it is real. It's very, very difficult to even convince the other woman on the jury that you are worthy of it. It's a very, very complex issue, and again, a slice of what we see in real life.
Especially, John, just to add to that, especially if you are not the usual kind of female figure, you know, if you're somebody who doesn't really embody the traditional female gender role, even more so, you have to.
I also think that it 100% played a role, and I wish that it had been brought up in the final tribal council, because I know that it played a role, because Tom played
100%. Because when I'm watching it, John, I've seen this edit of you. You're an absolute fighter. And if I'm judging it based on the tribal, I'm looking at it and I'm going, whoa, she lacked something. What is going on here? This isn't the same. So I'm like, based on this performance alone, you know, it wasn't as great as the expectation. So it
was horrible to have to watch it as well. And it's really triggering. My girlfriend's father started watching it recently, and she literally video called me at Final Tribal Council, and I'm watching myself shut down. Which is not something that I do, especially when it comes to verbal communication. That is one of my strengths. So watching myself shut down, and watching it was a hard thing to do, because I knew that the editors had a problem, because they had me going in as favorite to win. And during tribal council, so one of the things people come up to me and say is that, oh, you shouldn't have mentioned luck so much. But I probably mentioned luck 3 times in 3 hours, but they had to edit it to explain the votes, because there's no other explanation. It came out of left field. and it's hard to watch because I'm like, it's very difficult for me to have a relationship with people on my season because I'm so bitter about that vote because of the expectations they had of me. And I remember going to coffee with Annalise a year later, and she just said to me, I'm sorry, we didn't vote for you. Because what happened was they saw the edit at home, they saw the full story, and they were like, geez, she actually played a really good game. And that's the problem that you sit with as well.
However, not to detract too much from I mean, you should have won the game. You didn't win the game, but
100%,
it does
John.
set the franchise off onto the next one. Now we've got Anesu because of that craziness that happens. Absolutely mental. And now look at Survivor. Now we've got game players, people that are actually changing it up, people that are changing the narrative as to what the archetype for a man should be. Marisha, strong lady, and Anesu coming in there as the killer snake, the admirable snake, should I add. We do have a question. Anesu, would you come back for All Stars? Would you do that? Because Matsubetsu has put this out there like 3 or 4 times already. So would you? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. I'm always up for a challenge. I feel like an All-Star season will be a ramp up because of the fact that people have already seen your gameplay. So either you have to decide to stick with your same gameplay and hope that you dupe people again, or you have to come up with something completely new. But you also have people who've played the game before and know what to expect. So the competitor in me is just like drooling at the chance to go for an All-Stars. I would 100%. There's no doubt about it. And I'm sure, Jeanne, for you, I maybe I shouldn't speak on your behalf, but I'm pretty sure you've got the same perspective.
Look, we've had years to think about this, and firstly, there's only space for.
Jeanne, before you answer the question, am I witnessing a future All-Star alliance here? Is everyone else watching online getting excited about this prospect? Come on, let us know.
100%, 100%. I have said that it's such a bad idea for me to go back just because of how traumatized I am after the show. And my journey is so different to everybody else's because I was supposed to win and I didn't. And that trauma alone has, like, it's completely bizarre. So having to go back into the game and redo it is like, would I be able to outperform what I did before? But there's no part of me that can say no. That's the problem. But now my therapist says to me, she's like, so she says, would you go back? And I'm like, yeah, no, it's not a great idea, but yes. She's like, well, at least you're already in therapy, so.
I think all previous winners should be exempt of the show, and they should just make it a redemption season. Let's do that for All Stars. It's about that time. Okay, wait, whoa. Before we move on, Francois Chapman's on the show, Mr. Chappies himself, saying,
hey.
You're one of the most beautiful souls he's come across. So that's a fantastic comment in light of what's happening here today. We're experiencing it firsthand for those of you who are watching. But it is time for the Golden Spear. And this is the moment in the show where we talk about the episode that aired last night and we mention the names of the players who made the best moves. So we're going to give some nominations. We're going to say why we think they're deserving of this Golden Spear. And we're going to kick off with Anesu. Let's hear those names.
Okay, so I would definitely nominate Kieran for the Golden Spear. I think he played an excellent strategic game. I wouldn't have been able to fault his game. I can't fault his decisions and all of the different conversations that he had. So I definitely feel like Kieran would be somebody that would stand out to me. And strangely enough, I think I'd also nominate Anela. I think what Anela did was, you know, I'm not too sure whether it was the right thing for his gameplay, but I think it took courage for him to decide to side with what was obviously a much closer duo. And it took a lot of courage from him to do that, but he also needed to convince Nicole. And I think that must have been a really hard sell for him to do. So those are my 2 nominees for this episode. I'd nominate myself, but I went home. So what can you do?
I mean, we do try and avoid, you know, giving the person the wooden spoon for the person who's voted out. So I think it's worth giving a shot. I mean, we can say it was admirable that you had to make the move. There's nothing else you could do. I mean, your failure was, we know what the failure was. But yeah, Jeanne, who do you want to throw out there? So
it's kind of complicated because somebody that I thought had a really great episode was Nicole. From from doing the only person to stand up and do that challenge against Chappies, I thought Nicole has actually, and again, under the radar, become somebody who you really have to watch at challenges.
Yeah.
And I think that her putting her hand up and say, look, I don't feel comfortable to sit this out. I'm going to take on Chappies. And really the only person to stand up and do it amongst the strong people on the show. So, but she's also
a great nomination.
Yeah, but I think she's also somebody for me who's a nomination for the Wooden Spoon too, because just making, in my opinion, the wrong decision. But I would have liked to have actually seen the conversation between Smash and Nicole, because anyway. And then actually somebody who I think also is getting the snake bad rap is Santoni. Santoni is playing a fierce game. And anybody who sits next to Santoni at the end of this show is going to have a hard time, because she is consistently playing. And it comes across as flip-flopping, but that is a strategy in Survivor, whether you like it or not. She is playing, she's got a game, she's doing it, she's sticking to it, and it's working. So she also managed to get herself to Immunity Island and the Idol. She did really well at that challenge, almost taking that out as well. So those would be my nominations.
Look, I think, Anesu, your shots they're great shots, and they overt for everyone to watch. And we know the game that Kieran's been playing, it's been since the merge. I mean, since before merge, but it's really shining through right now. I think the Nicole shots I really like, because I get this feeling from what we've seen is probably going to be the turning point in her game, where, she's the only one stand up to Chappies. Now we're finally seeing, I mean, she gets criticized in the previous episode because of the reward decision taking, Rhaenyra and Amy along with her. So we're saying, oh, well, she can't be that strategic. But now finally we see a little bit more of that side of the game. But to Jeanne's point, what does Smash do to flip her? Because she seemed it was set in stone that she was going with you. But it is interesting from that perspective, I will say that. But I think it's going to be a tough one. I think overall, just because I'm saying it's the Kylo Ren, the Rey versus Kylo Ren, you and Kieran staring each other in the face type of thing. And that's what the edit. I mean, Tyson completely, he gets the edit where he's the power player here, but no power comes from him at all. And I think from Kieran just edging you out in the scenario, I think maybe that's who I would give it to. But I don't want to influence anyone. I'm going to count down to 3. Or count down from 3, 2, 1, and then you're going to throw your golden spear, and noise effects or sound effects are encouraged. And the throw.
Okay, do we shout out the person's name when we throw a spear?
Yes.
Okay.
You throw it, you go, and then you say the name. Okay. 3, 2, 1.
Santoni.
Kieran.
No consensus here. I love it. We don't agree with everything here. We've got strong people on the show today, and they're going to give their opinions. I love it. Right. Moving along. Wooden Spoon. If you agree or disagree, just let us know in the comments. Time for the Wooden Spoon for the player who made the worst move throughout the episode. And seeing as you started first last round, Anesu, Jeanne, let us hear the names. And also, this is an educational process. We don't do this to bash the castaway, but rather to inform the viewers as to what you can do to prevent the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everybody's playing really well this season. The Wooden Spoons for me again come to the point where it reminded me of last season, where they didn't take an opportunity to get Rob out. And the Rob in this scenario is both Tyson and Kieran, the two of them. Because if they're allowed anywhere near the final, it's game over for and whoever plays against them. And the thing about it is they have to go together because they are equal. So for me, the opportunity missed. So my nominees are Anela and Nicole, both of them, because for me the argument to go to the other side was stronger than going with the three-headed snake. And I would have loved to have known the inner workings of what made them go with the super strong decision.
But let's unpack that. Let's think about that, because Anela is saying if he goes with Anesu, the perception is Anesu, it's Anesu's move. If he helps flip on Anesu, he gets the credit for this. Can we unpack that a little bit and say why he's thinking this?
I don't.
Yeah, I thought that
be honest.
strange because in both scenarios he's the swing vote. You know, it's in both scenarios he's essentially the swing vote, and whoever decides to put a name out there, like Kieran putting my name out there or me putting Tyson's name out there, is still the director of the vote. So I found that interesting that he had that perspective. Possibly, maybe he felt like because him and I didn't have as deep a relationship as he did with Tyson and Kieran, that, you know, he'd be able to claim that it was less of a collaborative effort than claiming that when it came to Tyson and Kieran. But yeah, I was quite floored by that reasoning.
I also, there's problems with his reasoning as well, because I would think it would be stronger to send Kieran and Tyson to the jury, because they would be able to identify the moment that he took to flip on them and to make that decision. They would look at that and go, actually, you get my vote because of that move that you did there. It's getting us out, breaking up the three. That would have been a stronger vote on the jury than now him playing on the bottom of their alliance, even though they're promising him an in, which I believe that they might be true to because they don't want to sit next to Wadda. So I just think it was a missed opportunity. Like,
the only way I'm rationing, sorry, go ahead.
It just presented itself with all the advantages that could have been played. It just didn't work out, and that is going down to convincing Chappies and Santoni and Anesu and having proper conversations and working that relationship to make them know that that vote is going to it just was a missed opportunity for me to break up that three. That's why Nicole and Anela
I was just as flawed as the two of you, and when I'm trying to put myself in Anela's shoes, the only thing I can do is, and I'm looking at this and I'm saying, from that comment, he gets promised final three, so that's something to work with. Okay, maybe he can cause some chaos there when he brings Nicole with him. But the argument is that we know that the three-headed snakes, so to speak, are in firm control here, and they were gunning me, which I'm being Anela in the situation. And if Anesu comes in and manages to pull this blind side out, it's her who changes the game, as opposed to me surviving the game because I was on the bottom of the list. If that makes sense. I think that's the only reasoning I can fathom, being like, this is why he's saying this. But that's, we don't know. We're gonna have to.
And again, he may change his idea when he watches it on TV, going, I didn't make any of the decisions. So we're again getting the full picture, whereas he's only getting two different sides of a coin to flip. So
exactly, but from the jury's perspective, they survive. Somehow they survive, and it's clearly in his workings of the relationship with the three-headed snake. Yeah, so like that's maybe in his mind. Okay, but so we've got that name. Anesu, who do you want to say?
Yeah, I also found that Wadda's gameplay was interesting in this episode, where we get a glimpse into the dynamics of the three-headed snake, where that conversation with her and Kieran was right before Tribal. And I would have been quite uneasy, let's put it that way, if right before Tribal, my alliance were telling me who to vote for, and I was completely shocked by the name that they were throwing out there. So I would have thought that would have made Wadda question things a little bit about where she stood in that three-headed snake. We start to see that Tyson and Kieran kind of just see her as a number when they're now including Smash into their final three. So yeah, I would have liked to see Wadda questioning the dynamics of my vote out and where her power lied in that decision.
Yep. John?
I agree with you. And so sometimes you have your head so, and again, it's a comfort thing. You get lulled into this comfort. The same thing happened with me, where the moments of clarity came when Tom said to me, Jeanne, they want you gone. You're not going to make it to the final. And I went, what are you talking about? That's not what they told me. And I was like, oh, wait, we're playing Survivor. Everybody's lying. So I keep waiting for that like aha moment for Wadda to go, oh, what am I doing? I can't beat them if I go to the final three anyway. So to be like misdiagnosing your own game in this threesome is very problematic. And for her to just not pull the trigger, because she doesn't really have anything in a resume at the moment. She's been the third to the tripod. She hasn't been the boss of making any moves. So I keep hoping for like a come to Jesus moment where she gets slapped by somebody else to say, wake up, girl, because this final 3 moment that you're hoping for is not going to pan out well for you.
Yeah. And when I'm watching it, it's interesting because I liked her journey. And I think this is the journey they're telling. I like the journey where she came from. She struggles, she gets to the top. And it's almost like this person is forced from the bottom, gets into that power seat, and now is getting blinded by the power and getting super complacent. And that's all that was written on her forehead when I was watching it was complacency. And that's, for me, I think that's going to be ultimately probably the downfall in her game. So I would agree with both of you on that sentiment. I don't have much else to add to that. The funny thing is, the irony behind all of this is she keeps saying, we're never going to we never discount anyone, and eventually people are going to be cannibalizing. And the irony is that they throw her out of the three in that conversation, and that's just well, yeah.
I also don't know. It's such a complicated game because if you vote Warde out, she ain't voting for you. Let me tell you that. And again, the reason why Kieran and Tyson have to go together because you've alienated Warde. Warde will be like, no vote, goodbye, burn the place down. So they have to go together because if they break it up, Warde is going to be like, sorry, Tyson, sorry, Kieran, you're not getting my vote.
But wait, both of you are very good social players. If we're looking in Kieran's eyes when he's promising Anela this final 3 spot, how sincere is it versus being a gameplay move?
I would.
Kieran is saying what he needs to say in that moment. He will promise final 3 spot to whoever he needs a vote from.
Totally. I completely agree. I also think when people start talking to you about final 3 and plans to the end just before a vote, it's more likely that they're doing that to get your vote as opposed to them properly wanting that. I mean, our Destiny trio spoke about final 3, but we spoke about that before the reward challenge, before the immunity challenge. We weren't trying to convince anybody to do anything. So I definitely think Kieran was saying what he needed to get Anela on his side for this specific vote.
Yeah.
We've got Francois Chappie again. He's coming with he wants to nominate himself for the wooden spoon for not using the advantage to keep the Lions safe. How do we feel about this?
Typical Chappies. Those aren't the rules, my bro.
Yeah. Jammer, ouchie, jammer.
Right. On that note, I'm gonna count down, and you're gonna whip out the wooden spoon, and we're gonna hear that name that you want to give the wooden spoon to. 3, 2, 1.
Do we throw the wooden spoon? Sorry.
I
Do we throw the wooden spoon?
don't know. You can slap it on the forehead. You can go quack quack quack. You can do whatever you want.
Oh yeah. Okay.
All right. No pressure. But it has to be great. 3, 2, 1.
Anela.
Oh, Nicole, I can't. It's too difficult, this one.
Hey. Again, not agreeing. I love this. This is the first panel I've got. They're just both accounts are not agreed upon. Love it.
Yeah.
Time for the Storms Brewing. This is where we look at the footage from the previous episode and we kind of say what we think is to come. And Anesu says her best not to give any spoilers away, and that's where we're at. So let's hear it. What do we think's coming our way next episode?
Ooh, I think this the game's going to get darker. I think I kind of brought a little bit of the light, encouraging people to stay present and things. So I think things are going to get a little bit more serious, a little bit darker. I also think now that the emotions that people have in the game is going to mean that choosing who you vote for is going to be more and more difficult, especially because you're putting somebody on the jury, but also because these relationships are so tight-knit. So, I didn't take it personally when I was cannibalized from the Vuna Alliance, but I think any other Vuna player, maybe say for, Chappies or Santuni, I think that would be a real blow to be blindsided by somebody else, in the game and things like that. Even with Nicole and Anela, I think, if we see something where for whatever reason they turn on each other emotionally, I think that would be really tough.
Yeah.
And the same with Chappies and Santuni. So I think there's gonna be a lot of drama. I think things are gonna get a bit dark. Things are gonna get a bit hectic and emotionally heavy. Yeah. But I'm so there for it. I'm there for all the drama. I'm keen to see it.
Yeah, look, these episodes, I keep hoping for like some kind of like, okay, Anesu being voted out did come out of nowhere, but I keep hoping for this big moment where we take out the head. And
who's the head in your mind right now? Is it Kieran or is it
no?
Tyson?
There's two people at the top. There's two people. Yeah. It's the Harry Potter dog, man. It's the Harry Potter dog. There's two heads, and they both bark and they both bite, and they're equal. It's gonna get very interesting because I think there's like one more episode where they can play idols and advantages. So it's gonna be. I don't know what's coming. I hope that the loose change players get together and realize that they are not in the plan for the final, and they do something about it.
And the loose change players being the 2 and the 2, right?
Nicole and Nella and Tony. Yeah, and Anela and Nicole. That they have the power. They literally have the power. Can they work together and use it?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I want to ask the fire idol. I want to ask that question. What do we think about the construct of this? What do we think about the influence it's going to have in this game? And we love drama. How much drama is this thing going to bring?
Yeah, that's an interesting one because I also feel like unlike the previous episode, we haven't really seen anybody's fire skills play a big role in the game. You know, fire was so paramount to Rob's game. So, you know, if you had a fire idol where Rob was competing against somebody else, you'd probably say, Rob's going to take it. But with this idol saying that it's the players with the 2 top votes, right? The players who receive the most numbers of votes go against each other. And I don't know how that would go. Hey, that's going to be a nail biter if that thing gets played. I don't know how long we're going to see Immunity Island, happening for. So, will someone be able to win that fire idol? What's going to happen with it? That's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, the more twists.
Jeanne, I love how you think about it. It's your turn, and you're like, I'm going to be pensive in this moment. You will look at me.
No, it's because there's 2 sides to my brain. There's the player, and then there's the viewer. And the viewer loves the twists and turns and the tied destinies. Yay, cool. But the player, I'm just like, how much more can you try and play against all these twists and turns? So I don't know. It's, sometimes we get these things introduced and they never actually come to fruition. And I'm kind of hoping like, oh, cool, that was a good idea. And then we never kind of see it happen because it's brutal when you are on the other end of it. So if you have sort of rested and you haven't really learned how to make fire, then you're in trouble. Although everybody should know how to make fire.
So Anesu, who are the best? Oh, look at that.
You gotta know how to use it, man.
I mean, I would say it's pretty arbitrary to have in your house, except we do live in South Africa and we have a lot of load shedding. So credit to you, Jeanne. That's fantastic.
No, because this is what got me into Survivor. I did a fire making challenge in my backyard.
Wow.
And
did you have the countdown? Yeah. Did you do it against somebody?
Yeah. No, I did it against the clock and it took me 2 minutes to make fire.
Wow.
Huh.
Yeah.
Look at that. So you are geared up for the fire.
And the opening challenge in the season, I made fire to win like immunity for my tribe. So strategic, guys.
Just one of many reasons
why
Jeanne was robbed. From the people who are left in the game, who would you say is the best fire maker?
Tyson maintained the fire quite a lot at our tribe, but remember Chappies actually won a fire challenge already within the game, so probably between the 2 of them I would say. The other thing I wanted to add, Claudio, that we know is coming is the auction because of Santoni's time at Immunity Island. And I always love a Survivor auction. That was one thing where I was like, I missed the auction. But I'm super excited to see what happens there.
Yeah, and there'll be another advantage there as well. So there's a lot in the game besides strategy and stuff. When is Thursday?
Yeah.
I love that. I'm going to quote that. There's a lot in the game besides strategy and stuff. I mean, there's auctions. I love that. Auctions always, it's a good time because as a player, and curious, you've just missed out on this, Anesu, but if you were there and you did make it one episode longer or a couple of days longer, and you're sitting in that auction, how much does the inner person conflict sort of strategic moves versus personal gain in terms of just comfort? Where would you be in that scenario?
Yeah, I'm willing to hedge my bets and kind of go for the more comfort option in things like what you saw with our immunity challenge, where you kind of feel like the probability of you winning is lower than the probability of you losing. Is that I got completely lost in my probability talk, but I think you know what I mean.
Probability. You lost me as soon as you said that.
Yeah, so I kind of feel like in that kind of scenario where you saw me giving up the chance to compete in the immunity challenge and to get food, but that was because I knew that I probably wasn't going to win it. Whereas in an auction where it's almost guaranteed that there's going to be an advantage, in that situation, I would hold out for the advantage. Hey, I think in that situation, you don't have to beat anybody except, having the most number of money. Sometimes it's a dud advantage. We've seen it in previous seasons where you think it's an advantage and it ends up being nothing like that. But that's what I would be looking for. I'd be going for a strategic move in the auction as opposed to pleasure or comfort.
Is there potential for the players to break the auction like the Americans did? Everyone just refusing to auction up until they wait for the advantage. Do we think we might see that?
But there's also these emotional toys, because there's some people who haven't had letters from home, and that is a game changer. And if you're strong enough to sit through that, you could break it. But there's so many things that I promise you, the pool of something that you haven't had for so long, whether it's a pizza or chicken, in my case, and fried chips, like everything that is in your brain, I'm definitely going to wait it out, just breaks. They break. It's such a fascinating thing.
Yeah, the best way to describe it is like when I watch MasterChef on my couch and I end up having to order like Uber Eats because of all the incredible meals. And that's on your couch when you've had a full belly of food, you're comfortable, and you've got food in the fridge. Now, you can imagine the temptation of seeing an incredible meal in front of you when you're starving and hungry. It's so hard to say no, to resist.
And they also, they sneaky, because they'll ask you in your confessionals, what are you missing most? Like, what food are you missing most? And then lo and behold, it appears.
Yep.
These people are smart.
And to the question that we have here at the bottom, is it possible for a player to ease? We know the camera crew are listening to what you're saying during, obviously, confessionals, but is it possible for a player to hear you or eavesdrop during the confessionals?
I think throughout the game, and at least this was my experience, the crew try to interfere as little as possible. So they want the mechanics of the production to interfere as little as possible with the game. So I think every effort is made to make the game fair so that confessionals are a safe place for people to talk about their gameplay and things like that. And of course, anything is possible. I don't think, the crew can also keep track of every single player and where they might be while someone's doing a confessional. But I think that they try very hard to make sure that doesn't happen.
And they remove you from the game. So your camp is here. They will take you there to go and do a confessional. But sometimes one of the beaches that we landed up on was tiny, so small that they didn't have space. And it's a reason why it wasn't the merge beach, because they were like, we can't do confessionals here. It's too small. And I am loud. And so sometimes the producers were like, just speak. Also, I couldn't whisper when people were trying to strategize with me. They were like, Don, must you be so loud? So, yeah.
And so in your future alliance, just please take note of this. This is what this is. I'm just giving you keys here.
Listen, I've learned, guys. No, I will write it in the sand for you now. I learned my lesson.
I do want to ask, in terms of seeing as we're on the confessional sort of moment, how much do they interact with you in terms of they're saying, okay, come follow us? And is there conversation that takes place in between, or they strictly just keep quiet and they just go, cool, that side, and you quiet, you walk all the way there, and then they shoot the confessional, they ask you 1 or 2 questions and they disappear? Or are you just going there and you speaking like it's your diary session?
I actually preferred not to talk to the crew before confessionals, because I was also running through what I wanted to talk about in my confessional. You know, I was thinking about what important points do I want to put across? What do I need to work through by speaking through it through my confessional? So I kind of preferred, and maybe that was me. I was very much in my head. I was always thinking until they told me that they were ready to shoot it. I didn't really have conversations with the crew very much at all, to be honest.
So one of the things that they try and do is the only people that you have a relationship with is the producer. So there are a bunch of producers on the beach that are there to tell your story. So the relationship with a camera person, a mic person, sound, lighting, whatever it might be, they are told they're not allowed to talk to you at all. So the only person that you have this human contact with is the producer, who sits with a notebook and says, can you take us through the challenge today? And basically you're narrating the story from that day. And they do it with everybody. So your turn comes and off you go. And then you come back and they're like, Jeanne, your turn. Then off you go and you come back. So it's not as if you like, oh, that person's going to talk to the camera by themselves. They're up to something. They literally record everybody doing confessionals. You do about 2 or 3 a day. And specifically, you do one after a challenge, you do one before tribal council, you'll do one at some point during the day. So you're constantly going to talk to the camera. But there's no like personal, and this is where the paranoia starts to come in. And Anesu, I'm glad that I'm upset that you didn't make it further into the game, but there's a turning point in the game where the paranoia, in my case, got out of control, and perhaps you have a better control over your mental space, but I thought I had, but the paranoia set in that I started to question the producers. I was like, you're playing it up against me, and that is not a comfortable place to be in, because they're the only people that you can trust in the game. Now I started to question whether they were playing me up against other people, and that's 100% not the case.
Oh,
so it's
question from Joseph saying, I wondered whether camera people may help survivors with finding immunity idols by pointing the camera at the possible location.
I don't even think they know where they are. I think there's probably one person on the art department who will go and plant them. They don't know the clues. They don't know where they are. They will just follow you if you're moving, because there's a lot of sitting around doing nothing. Let me tell you that. One episode is 3 days on Survivor. So you're seeing all the action, but there's a lot, especially at this point in the game, where there isn't even that much conversations, because you know everybody's story. You're mentally fatigued. You're emotionally fatigued. And there's not much happening. So as soon as somebody moves to go and do something, a camera will follow them.
Yeah.
How much can this be used to strategic advantage in your game? If you can see, so I've got an alliance with you, Jeanne, Nesu, but you know, I'm paranoid about you and you might be turning on me and you walk away, but I know you're closer to Nesu. You go do your confessional and I'm like, hey, here's a gap for me to talk to Nesu and try and change things up a bit. How much does that happen?
I think every player uses every opportunity that you can. So if you see that somebody's missing because they're going to harvest oysters, going to fetch eggs, or going to do a confessional, regardless of what the reason is, if that person is absent, you're going to use it to your advantage if you're thinking strategically. So I definitely think that people notice when certain people aren't at camp, aren't around the fire. Sometimes we see it when people are sleeping, and we see gameplay happening. So yeah, I think every good Survivor player should be an opportunist, and often people's absences are a great time to cause a little bit of chaos.
And again, everybody's absent at some point during the days.
Yep.
Equally so as well. Yeah.
And the only time they won't follow you is when you say, I'm literally going to pee. You don't have, and then they'll be like, are you sure? Yes. You don't need to follow this, cameraman or woman.
Just so Tatu's been making notes. I think a couple of people have been taking some interesting notes based on what you've given. Yeah, so thank you very much for that perspective. One last question before we move over to the final thoughts. Which pre-merge boot is most likely to win if things were different, in both of your opinions?
I'm going to go for Dino Red Riding Hood.
Yo, Dino's name gets thrown out on the show. Like, I don't even try to do this. People just throw his name out. Why?
No. Yeah, no. Dino had a really good handle on the game, and I think if he had disguised his fandom, as well as Rainier had done, I think he would have gone a lot further. So that was
and managed his paranoia. That got the best of him.
Yes, of course. Yeah. But I think Dino is actually a very likable guy. I think he had a good social game in the sense that he did actually improve on people's perspective of him the further along that he got. So he was able to change people's views in terms of being able to trust him a bit more. But I think it was the start of his game that was just too damaging for him to get back from. But I think if he had gotten to merge, he was good at puzzles. He surprised himself and a lot of us actually with his physical abilities as well. And of course, we know he was strategic and he knew so much about the gameplay as well. So definitely would put down Dino's name there.
Would you agree, Jean? Or do you have another name in mind?
Yeah, Dino is definitely the reason why he didn't make it to merge, because everybody knew all of these things. And he's, it would be like you landing up in Survivor because you've advertised your fandom. You know the game, and that's
There's
the same thing.
Advertisements happening, Jean.
Jacques also got into trouble
because with the two queens of Survivor. That's all this is. Please, everyone.
No.
Not an
But the problem is, it's a double-edged sword, because it does give producers and go, oh, this guy knows the game. He's good at speaking. He would make, like, I would cast you, because there's a couple things that people look for when they cast. Can you narrate the story? That's why Santoni gets so much airtime, is because she's so good at narrating the storyline that's going on. So can you speak to the camera? Can you be natural? Are you representing an archetype? And are you your character? I didn't go on and play the character. I am the character. And I'm always the character, whether you meet me in real life or on an island somewhere. And you have to identify your character and who you are and what you stand for. And then you must be that. So you can't, in your entry, go and say, oh, I'm this, and then they meet you in real life and they're like, no, you're none of those things. Anyway, that was a sidebar. But so advertising and doing these podcasts is great because you advertise your skills, but you also immediately put a target on your back. Just FYI. Same thing with Jacques. The same thing happened. He was too much of a game player, and they were like, well, bye.
Bye, Felicia. Yeah.
I also see that. I also see there, Misobetsu said that he'd also would have said Toriso, and
that's my pick.
Toriso's similar to Dino in terms of her knowledge of the game and her strategy.
Absolutely.
But I found that Toriso struggled a little bit more than Dino with the social game.
With
the ability.
Yeah.
And
I've spoken a lot to Teresa. Sorry, and the one thing that I think surprised her, and again, it's something that you can never predict all of the elements in the game. And the one thing that surprised her was being on beaches with people who understood the world so differently to her. And you mentioned the Afrikaans and the culture differences, and I think that put a spanner in the wheel and clipped her, and she couldn't recover from it. She would be mine. I just think that her brain works. Even now, she'll message me and go, oh, this person, she mentioned last week that Amy was one of the people who got voted out without ever having a vote against her. And I was like, what? She's like, yeah, I went out without ever having cast a vote. I was like, she just has this way of consuming the game. And I characterize superfans as two ways. You're either a fan of the game, a super fan of the game, or you're a student of the game. And she's a student of the game. I enjoy Survivor. I get hooked by challenges and characters. I couldn't tell you who won all the I couldn't tell you where they went. I couldn't tell you a lot of stuff. But I enjoy Survivor. But some people consume it like that's their livelihood, man. And she's just one of them. And Dino, the same. Yeah.
And I think, to your point on Teresa, the incredible read on the game, incredible, and it was
so
just
good.
social dynamic that was troubling for it based on what we had spoken on previously. Now,
and
final thoughts. No, go ahead.
Okay.
If you've got time, I've got time. At the end of the day, it's about you having time. That's cool.
Awesome,
Go ahead.
Awesome. Yeah, so I actually had a really great relationship with Teresa. We got along a lot. And I think it was one of those sad situations once again where I felt like Teresa could have added so much value to mine, Tyson, and Kieran's game. And I kind of, think back to her vote out and wonder if I hadn't have gone to Immunity Island, whether things would have been a bit different, whether I would have been able to bridge the gap between her and the boys a little bit. But I think that in terms of at least my gameplay, I really saw her as an asset. I thought that she would have given me really good advice. I felt like I could trust her. So I think she's a phenomenal player. And yeah, I just wanted to mention that because I think, that's some of the things that you don't really see on the show. We only get to see, like Jeanne says, a little small amount of what's shown. And I think she would have been an asset to any alliance. And I think it's a sad reality that people from face value didn't value her and what she could bring to their alliances.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And for me, seeing Teresa, her character on the TV, on Survivor, I was like, we've never seen this person on Survivor before. And just understanding the game and the human element, but just not... One of the things she told me is that when she first got there, somebody said to her, "Oh, you speak very well." And that kind of thing slaps you, right? Because you live in this world where you have your friends, you have your family, and that doesn't happen to you in real life. It may happen behind your back, but nobody says that to you. And now you're on an island with people who you need to engage with, and those are like the opening words, and you realize that there are a bunch of people here that you will never relate to in that way. So yeah, I think she kind of found herself side-swiped by something she didn't expect to happen. So yeah, very sad. I hate it. That was my worst vote out. I was like,
she brought so much joy up to that moment with the twinkling of her toes in the sand, and it just shows you how how immersive the show actually is in terms of, you think you're going to play a game of chess, you're going to use people as chess pieces, but what they say and do to you kind of affects your decisions, which is pretty interesting. That is also a partnership I could have seen. Sorry, Anesu.
Yeah, and I always, my favorite saying now when something doesn't go my way is like, "Oh my heck." There's that confessional from Teresa saying that. I absolutely love that saying, and she was an icon in her own right for sure.
Yeah,
I do wish that she partnered, or Dino partnered up with her, the two of them, seeing as those are the two names that everyone's throwing out here. That was an opportunity missed, in my opinion. But final thoughts, ladies. I'm just super glad. My final thoughts, I'm just going to open up because I normally don't do this, but I'm super excited. I've got 2 Survivor Queens on here. And, I mean, congratulations on being crowned here, Anesu. And I put out the tweets. People agree with the sentiment. We know Jeanne's the queen, the queen that was robbed. You're the queen that, can climb the ladder next time a bit further with Jeanne in the All-Star season. But final thoughts from the two of you ladies.
Yeah, I just think it's super epic that I'm ending off my day talking about the politics of gender and race and, our society and privilege. I mean, that's right up my alley. And I think especially for Survivor South Africa, you can't watch the game without taking into account the social dynamics that we have as a society. And race, culture, language, gender all play a role. And Jeanne, honestly, to be able to share this is my last, exit interview with you. It's like I have so many cherries, and you, Claudia,
and you, Claudia. Don't worry, you're also great.
Claudia, of course. Yeah.
No, sorry, I completely hijacked Jean's moment, just like what's his name did the other guy that won. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Anesu. Go ahead.
Yeah, but really, I think to spend this evening with you guys is like, I've got so many cherries on the top of my cake. It's like bursting with cherries on the top, but this is just, I don't know whether it's icing, casting sugar. I'm not a baker, but you know what I'm saying. This has been so awesome. Thank you so much, Claudio. And I think it's fate, Jeanne, that, you know, I got to talk to you and have this conversation. I'm just so grateful.
No, look, I there are a lot of people that I've connected with from your season, who I've literally on that kind of level really had like made relationships with, and so it's an absolute privilege. And I was gutted. And people saw me after the episode like, "What's wrong with you?" I'm like, "I'm upset now. I'm upset." Because I always thought that Kieran and Tyson would win the game, and in the last couple episodes, I've been like, actually, Anesu's got something here. So I was kind of heartbroken there, but no, it's been an absolute privilege to chat to you. And I just love, you're very different to me, but the way that you see the world and engage and the energies and your mindfulness. And I just think there's so much to learn from you in the way that you move through the world. So absolutely privileged to chat to you. And I am so excited about this season. I just really, really, really hope somebody makes a move, because otherwise we're going to have the predictable winners at the end. It's not terrible, but as somebody watching, I'm just like, take the opportunity, please. But yeah,
I think it's going to be epic. You know, I'm not giving. I think I've done a pretty good job of not giving away any spoilers. I've made it seem like I don't know what's going on, but it's going to be epic. Stay tuned, guys. It's going to be a wild ride.
Yeah. And on that note, we might always end off with one last comment from Joseph saying, thank you, Anesu, for taking the time answering our questions. You're so articulate, smart, beautiful, and such an awesome Survivor player to watch on TV. I mean, who gets that comment just thrown out there? Like Amazing. I said, if there was any player that would have gotten voted off the island in the fashion that they went out, I probably would have chosen your story, personally speaking. I don't know about you, John, if you would have done the same thing.
I don't know how she can be so diplomatic about it. I'd be pissed, but I'm glad as a Survivor player that she sees that, oh no, I got blindsided. That's great. I don't know how I would have been voted off. I would have flipped the table or something. I don't know.
And that's why you're Jeanne and I'm Anesu, right?
Exactly.
That's why it is.
100%. Amazing.
I'm just super, super glad that TNO could be the catalyst to this future alliance on the All-Star season. So shout out to that. And that's how I'm going to end off.
Claudio, growing
to all the viewers that tuned in. And that means a lot coming from the plant person. And I can't believe I haven't mentioned anything about plants up until this moment in time. You must see my garden at home, by the way. Anyway, Joseph, Tatu, Metsovetse, I think I butchered
Chappies.
Chappies, thank you so much, Chris.
Hilgard, always.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I normally have a saying on my other shows, but I'm just going to end off with this one. If you don't know what to be cool. Have a fantastic evening.